All right, we did that demo. In addition, there's a PHP Provider. So PHP is kind of cool. How many PHP developers in here? Any of you? Really? Just 2 of you? 3 of you? Either you're tired, it's late, or you're really not. But again, it doesn't matter. There is a Java. Someone mentioned Java. There's a separate Java provider that has its own sort of list. And so what we have here is the PHP Provider. If you're in Solaris 10, you have, at the bottom there, you can look at every function in PHP that we enter and return from. If you're in Open Solaris, we've enhanced it, and so you get some additional information, like when a compile happens or an exception is thrown, so on and so forth. Okay, so let's look at the PID provider. I have a little PHP program called Blastoff that all it does is call just a couple functions. Like function 1 calls function 2, calls function 3, calls Blastoff, and then it repeats itself. Nothing too crazy. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. Okay. Now we can quit out of this. Let's see. All right, so these are the PHP. I ran that DTrace-N-L. These are the probes that are available from this PHP program. Let me show you something interesting. I'm going to quit that program. I'm going to run this again. It comes back and says, I failed to match any PHP probes. I don't have a PHP process running on my system right now. And so this is why the number of probes that are available is totally dynamic. So I'm going to go ahead and start this up again. And you basically see, this list isn't too long, you see everything that was in, basically in the slide. Any of these probes I can enable. There's, 14. So not too many. That's manageable. And so I have a little PHP script that I wrote that is going to enable a probe whenever a PHP function is entered. That's what we have at the top here. And then whenever that function is entered, what I'm going to do is use the printf command to tell me that that function called, I've got argument 0, argument 1, and argument, let me get this word wrap out of here, argument 2. Now, the question is, well, how do I know what these arguments are? And that's just through, there's too many probes to document DTrace. There's no book that documents 64,000 plus DTrace probes. I don't know how big that book would be. So you kind of have to use Google and find out what you're looking for. PHP is probably pretty well documented. But in the case of PHP, the first argument is the function that the probe went into. The second argument is the file on disk that probe went into. And the third argument is the actual line of code in that file that probe went into. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty powerful that I can trace down to the exact line. So let's go ahead and run this. Yeah. DTrace. Oh, yes. When you're running a script, you have to specify with the .s that you're running a script. Let's try it like that. There we go. We matched the one probe. And so now what we're seeing, it's not happening too fast. As that function is running, we're just seeing DTrace telling us, yeah, we had function entry, we had Blastoff in export home b-leonard Blastoff at line 10, called launch at line 32, called 3 at line 27, so on and so forth. All right, so let's hit our, let's stop this, and you'll see DTrace will stop spitting out information as well. So let's hit our Drupal application and see what happens. Wow, we didn't get anything there. What's up with that? Any guesses?
Set up only for PHP.
I did, but Drupal's using PHP.
No, but particular process was not running when DTrace started?
Apache's running. PHP is running in Apache. So you're kind of on track. One of the problems is I don't have privilege. So the Apache process that's running PHP is running as a privileged process that I don't have access to running as myself. So if I pfexec that same command, now you see it matched 11 probes. Now I'm looking into Apache's Zend module, which is running PHP, and I found those 11 probes. So now if I come and just try something, come back. There, I hit a bunch of stuff. So I see exactly what was happening within Drupal at that time. All right. So that's the PHP provider. Let's see where we're at here. Okay, so what about the whole stack? Right? We've looked at individual components. How do I now sort of start to analyze what's going on in this stack? And so let's look at some more meaty DTrace programs. And so I have a program. Let me run it for you first so you can see what it does. It's called dist top, and its goal is to show me on my system what's consuming Oh, that's why. Okay, that's fine. So here's a little script that every 2 seconds is showing me. It's kind of like, if you're familiar with top from Linux, it's kind of showing me my own version of top. What's happening in MySQL, percentage-wise, every 2 seconds, MySQL, Apache, Firefox, PHP, Java, or other, which in this case is I'm pretty idle, or whatever else is going on in the system. So now the trick is I need to put some load on Drupal, right? How do I put load on an application that I want to test? What are some ways? What did I hear? I can. Well, what about some load? I actually want to hit it with some load generating. What's? Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go with JMeter. Any of you familiar with JMeter app? It's sort of open source app. Okay. So there's plenty to choose from. I went with JMeter. I actually have a. It's free. I found it pretty cool. I put a little icon on my desktop. So you can see just starting JMeter. It's a Java app, right? You can see the it detected that Java is now consuming 94% of my system resources. Okay, that should die down as it started. So this little guy I can create test plans. So I created a Drupal one. And you can do all kinds of cool stuff with JMeter. It actually gets, if you wanted to be, you could do some pretty scary stuff against, websites because it's pretty wide open. It lets you specify the commands you want to perform. And so what I'm doing here is I've set up 4 commands. I'm going to go to the Drupal homepage. I'm going to log in. So I'm passing in my username and password. I'm going to view my account. And then I'm going to log out. Pretty simple. Nothing wild. I'm just going to run this. And so if I look at the Drupal users, it has this option where I can specify how many threads do you want to do this for. And think of a thread as a user. And so I'm going to go with 10 users. I'm going to have 10 people logging into the system. Actually, let's make it 50. Right? This is all on my laptop. Given it's 50 users, do you want to hit 50 all at once? Probably not. Let's ramp those 50 up over 10 seconds. And then how many times do you want all those 50 users to log in? I can do that forever, or I can do it some iteration. So let's just go ahead and run this. And you'll see up here in the top right corner, sort of the users ramping up. You'll see down here, all of a sudden I get a feel for this. Maybe it's a common use pattern of my website. Again, take Drupal out of the picture. It's just my example. This could be your web application. You've created a little test. And now I can see, okay, I've got the database. It's consuming about 25% of my resources. Apache, also about 25%. PHP, a little bit higher, 40, 30%. Java in there. Why is Java in there? My app doesn't use any Java. Why is Java showing up? JMeter, yeah. JMeter itself. That's the issue with any load generating tool. Ideally, you run it from a separate computer because you don't want it to factor in It's consuming resources itself. I mean, it's generating 50 users worth of work, and that will definitely affect the performance of my application if it has to do that. So ideally, you would do that from another computer. So let's give my computer a break. The fan's running now. Look at it. It's like all upset. So we'll stop this. We'll see it climb down. We'll see my chart go. So let's look at dist-top.d. So as I said, definitely a little bit more advanced than we've been looking at, but I think it should all make sense. So the first thing we're doing is, again, it's an executable script. I'm just calling DTrace at the top. By the way, this -z parameter that I pass in to DTrace tells it to fire up probes even though no probes are found at the moment. So if Apache wasn't running, it's just sort of a safety measure. Because before, when I tried to run it against PHP and it said, I don't see any PHP probes, if I passed the -z option, it wouldn't care. It would sit and wait for probes to appear. So then there's a begin probe. And this is just, as the name implies, it's going to fire when the script begins. And I'm just printing that column header that we see that has the titles. And then I've got that PHP request startup. And what I'm doing is, this is a variable here, this in PHP, I'm setting it to 1 to indicate that I'm in a PHP request. And then when the request shuts down, I'm setting that variable to 0. All right, so let's see how we're doing that. We're using a profile probe, and there's several of these, but this particular one runs 1,001 times a second. It is pinging my system to see what's going on. And all I'm doing is, first of all, I'm taking a total count of how many times a probe is fired, and then I'm just looking at, okay, what executable am I in at this, what's this, a millisecond? What executable am I in right here? And is the executable MySQL? If it is, increment the counter for MySQL. Is it HTTPD? Okay, if it is, are we in PHP? Are we in the Zen module? If so, increment the PHP counter. If we're not in the Zen module, then increment the HTTP counter or the Apache counter. Okay, then we come through there. Is the exec name Java? Increment the Java counter. Is it Firefox? Increment the Firefox counter. Otherwise, if we're none of those are the only ones I care about, then increment the other counter. And if for some reason other was really high, we could figure out what that was and add that to our counter list. And then I simply come down and print every 2 seconds the output, the counters, and then every 30 seconds I reprint the header row again so it doesn't scroll off the screen. And I'm done. That's 5 seconds. So that's, we could spend a day talking about DTrace, but this is an introductory presentation. Hopefully it got you excited. The one thing I do want to show you quickly before I hand over is just the resources. Again, Google DTrace. The best way to learn DTrace, there are tons of existing scripts out there. Look at them and see what they're doing. And that's really, learn by example. Don't try to just go at it yourself because you'll get frustrated. There's so many probes. Yes, sir. A probe is just it's the component that's being enabled. See, a lot of them are dynamic. There's not actually always something inserted in the code, but it's being dynamically inserted in the code for you to provide information back, if that helps. There's so many probes. So I did 64,000 probes. Think about it. In the operating system alone, how many methods, how many functions make up Open Solaris? Thousands, right? Each one of those has an entry and exit probe alone. So I say DTrace is safe for production systems, and it is, but you still have to use it with caution. If I tried to fire up all 64,000 probes on my system, it would come to a grinding halt, for sure. Yeah. But otherwise, it's pretty lightweight. It's not too bad. No, Linux, sorry, it is not. It's definitely one of the unique features of Solaris that, yeah. Yes?
Yeah. I saw your blast-off application. Let's say I write the same application in Java. Now, the Java program will be interpreted by the JVM. Right. So can I use DTrace for this and actually find out which functions are being called, like 1, 2, 3?
I'm sure you
blast
could.
off.
Yeah, I'm sure you could.
I can find out.
Yeah, we can try it later.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll work on it now. All right. Thank you.